Walter Heitman, former Chilean ambassador to the United States, September 10th, 1974.
This government has not received money from CIA because it's against our principle. And if somebody from this government had ever received money from the CIA, first of all, I don't know if the CIA has spent some money in Chile. I'm very doubtful. That has to be proven before we discuss it. And I'm sure, knowing the member of this government, I cannot talk for every civilian, but I talk for the people responsible of the government. None of them has received a single penny from CIA.
Jack Kubich, Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs, September 20th, 1973.
I want to emphasize that there was no contact whatsoever by the organizers and leaders of the coup directly with us, and we did not have definite knowledge of it in advance. Also, either explicitly or implicitly, our government has been charged with involvement in the coup or complicity in the coup in some way. This also is absolutely false. As official spokesmen of our government have stated repeatedly, we were not involved in the coup in any way.
CIA participation in the military coup in Chile on September 11, 1973 has been confirmed. Confirmed for those of us who heard and believed Chileans before the coup denounced the CIA for sabotaging the Chilean economy and working with right-wing elements in Chile. It has been confirmed for those of us whose faith lay more in the governmental process of the United States, which brought to light the Watergate scandal and all that came with it. For some of us, it might have been confirmed once removed by headlines in local newspapers or in the astonished voices of journalists familiar to us. And if anyone remains in doubt, there are the words of William Colby, the director of the CIA, who testified in congressional hearings that the Nixon administration had authorized more than $8 million for covert CIA activities in Chile between 1970 and 1973 to make it impossible for President Allende to govern Chile. It may take years to uncover the whole story, but it is now impossible to deny that the CIA played a major role in the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende.
The subject of this program is to document CIA involvement in Chile from 1964 to 1973. Since this involvement, the CIA continues to operate in countries of Latin America and the rest of the world. CIA operations in Chile cannot be seen as an isolated event. Such policies were carried out in Guatemala, the Dominican Republic, and Indonesia before Chile. They are now being carried out in Portugal, according to ex-CIA agent Philip Agee. Perhaps the most important characteristic of all of these events is that they were financed by us. It has been, and continues to be, our tax dollars that are funneled into agencies such as the CIA for use in these kinds of operations. We have never voted to have the money we give this government in taxes used to overthrow the governments of foreign countries. One of the most astonishing points made by Philip Agee in his CIA diary is that the history of countries in Latin America where the agency has operations has often been molded to suit the needs and policies of the CIA and the U.S. government. We are accustomed to believing that the history of a country should be determined by its own people. The question, therefore, stands out. Are we here in the United States determining our own history, or is the country that gave birth to the CIA also its own victim? Is what the CIA did in Chile representative of the desires of the people of the United States? Our need to know must be determined by us. Simply, we need to know everything.
There is some evidence that the CIA and other agencies of the U.S. government began to operate in Chile as early as 1958, when Jorge Alessandri, the candidate of the National Party, defeated Salvador Allende by about 30,000 votes. And in the early 1960s, the U.S. Defense Department was involved in a study known as Project Camelot, which dealt with how the United States would deal with revolutionary movements in Latin America. But the first major involvement of the CIA in the internal political affairs of Chile began prior to the 1964 presidential elections. In 1964, Chile was in deep economic trouble. Many Chileans lived in great poverty, and their discontent was growing. The ruling elite of Chile, and those who controlled the country's national resources, realized that without some reforms, popular revolution would appear to be the only solution to the millions who had nothing. The concept of a people's revolutionary movement in Chile frightened a lot of rich Chileans and a lot of rich citizens of this country, and it frightened people in the Kennedy and Johnson administrations as well. In an interview published in Fortune magazine in June 1975, former CIA Director John McCone pointed with some pride to his agency's handling of the 1964 elections in Chile. In that interview, McCone states that in 1962, President Kennedy decided in the National Security Council that Chile must not, quote, enter the communist camp under Allende's banner. According to John McCone, that position was also held by Kennedy's successor, Lyndon Johnson, and the CIA was given the go-ahead to make sure that Salvador Allende, the candidate of the Frente de Acción Popular, was defeated by Eduardo Frei, the candidate of the Christian Democratic Party. Frey's platform, which called for land reform, the Chileanization of some industries, the extension of trade unions, and an end to unemployment, was acceptable to the Chilean middle and upper classes and to the U.S. government, so $3 million were appropriated to help Eduardo Frei in his campaign for the presidency. To make sure that no one knew where Frei was getting this help, the CIA laundered the funds to make them difficult to trace. Former CIA agent Philip Agee describes the laundering process and how he himself was directly involved in cleaning up some of the money sent to Chile for use in the 1964 presidential campaign.
Usually the CIA operational funds will come directly from Washington. Most stations will have in a safe in the offices of the CIA and under the control of the station administrative assistant, both dollars and local currency. So there will be two types of currency. And this money is usually sent down whenever necessary through the diplomatic pouch in the normal way that most CIA documents, that is non-telegraphic communications, are sent. They go in the diplomatic pouch from Washington and are carried as if they were State Department documents by the regular State Department couriers. And then they're passed to the CIA offices, or office, by the State Department communications and records people whenever they arrive. There are certain addresses or names on the envelopes which are, they would all go have the CIA chief of station's name on them, so they're passed to him. This is not just documents. This could be, as I say, money and objects of all kinds, some very large. Now, in the money, the administrative assistant would then get that money and give it out to each of the officers as he needed. Usually, a man would have a revolving fund, I did, for example, of X number of dollars and X number of pesos or whatever the local currency is each month. And I would pay all of my people out of these funds and account for them at the end of the month and get a replenishment of the fund. The money is acquired by the CIA in Washington through purchasing agents on the New York currency market, and I think it's the First National City Bank which does most of this purchasing. It may well be other banks too, but this is handled by the Office of Finance of the CIA in Washington through the New York banks. Now, this is the normal process, and as the funds in a station go down, the administrative assistant will advise headquarters to please send additional funds, and then they'll come down in the next pouch with additional either dollars or local currency or both. In the case of the Chilean operation of 1964, that was a special situation because so many Chilean escudos were needed. I don't know just how many millions of dollars were involved there, but I believe it was $8 to $12 million in the spent in that Chilean operation of 1964. The Office of Finance, through the normal procedures in New York, wasn't able to get enough escudos. So they opened up two regional offices, one in Lima and one in Rio de Janeiro, to get more. I only came into it because those two regional offices, plus the New York operation, couldn't satisfy all the requirements. So on two occasions they asked us there in Montevideo to purchase through the First National City Bank office in Montevideo, which knew perfectly well what was going on, these additional escudos, and they were purchased by buyers who went over to Santiago with dollars, bought the escudos on the black market, brought them back in suitcases, paying off the customs people not to inspect, turned them over to the bank assistant manager with whom I was in contact, who in turn called me. I went down and picked them up, brought them back to our offices in Montevideo, in the embassy. There we counted them and sent them back over to Santiago, Chile, in the diplomatic pouch this time, where they were given to the CIA station and eventually doled out to the different agents working in that operation.
When the ballots were counted in 1964, Eduardo Frei was the new president of Chile. The more privileged Chileans who had supported Frei's candidacy were happy, for their interests were once again secure. And the CIA was happy, for in the words of then CIA Director McCone, the $3 million spent was a frugal expenditure, and the Chile operation could go down in covert history as a good case. During the 6-year reign of Eduardo Frei in Chile, there were some changes made. Frei's administration passed bills that called for the redistribution of land in Chile, and some poor rural Chileans became small landowners. The director of the agrarian reform was Jacques Chonchol, a Christian Democrat and also a minister in Frei's cabinet. The Frei government also had a plan for the Chileanization of copper, the country's most valuable natural resource. This Chileanization of copper program consisted of the government buying 51% interest of the American-owned copper companies. But Frei's programs, though they brought about some reforms, did not really solve any of the real economic problems faced by Chile, and for the most part, the have-nots in Chilean society continued to have nothing. By the end of Frei's administration, the gross national product of Chile had decreased, and those who had called for a revolution in Chile began once again to organize. The failure of the Frei government to bring about meaningful changes in Chile did not surprise Chile's poor, and did not surprise those in the United States who were concerned about the political mood there and its relationship to U.S. interests. Immediately after the successful CIA operation of 1964, the U.S. Defense Department financed a series of specific studies on how to create revolutions in different Latin American countries. Among them was Chile. In both 1965 and 1966, Defense Department research grants were paid to ABT Associates, a Cambridge, Massachusetts research firm, via the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the Pentagon. ABT developed a planning simulation game called Politica, which was designed to allow Pentagon planners to more effectively predict and plan for revolution in specific Latin American nations. And beginning in 1966, Politica incorporated classified information for its use by the Pentagon. The initial cost of this project was $100,000. Daniel del Solar, who worked on the development of Politica, describes how Politica works.
Politica, as I designed it with Martin Gordon, was a planning tool which consisted of a generalized Latin American nation. It wasn't specific. The $80,000 or $100,000 that the American University gave to apt associates to develop Politica, this money was to buy a generalized model, a kind of like a non-specific car. I mean, it isn't a Cadillac, it isn't a Chevrolet, it's just a car. And then later on, when you put on specific information, then it becomes a specific simulation for a specific nation. The simulation that we designed originally, the generalized one, had 35 actors. It had 4 different cities. It had 4 different regions. The major capital city, the second city, the agricultural region, and the mineral region. And in each of these regions, there were workers, middle class, upper class, army, 3 political parties, Christian Democrat, the equivalent of Christian Democrat, the AD political party, the Acción Democrática, which is a national socialist kind of political party, and a radical or revolutionary party, and military in each of these regions. And embassy. In the capital city, there were embassy people and foreign capitalists. So the whole picture of a Latin American nation was very specific. The analysis did not leave out anything because, of course, they were interested in the best possible analysis.
In 1969, 1 year before the victory of the Popular Unity Coalition, it was clear that the work of the CIA had not yet yielded the intended outcome. So, on this eve of another presidential election, the CIA distributed $500,000 in Chile, quote, in order to maintain those individuals who would sustain the anti-Allende forces, unquote. This money was secretly authorized by the 40 Committee, a high-level intelligence panel headed by Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. In this year, the CIA's attention was not so clearly focused on events in Chile because of the allegations that the CIA was involved in the Watergate break-in. An article in Fortune magazine of June 1975 on the CIA described the panic in Washington when the results of the '70 election were made known to the world. Quote, "Suddenly in early September 1970, the State Department awakened to the fact that Allende had emerged in first place in the presidential election, with 36% of the popular vote to just under 35% for the conservative candidate and not quite 28% for the Christian Democrat. Inasmuch as no candidate had a majority, the choice was thrown into the legislature. With barely 7 weeks left before the legislature was to vote, the National Security Council ordered the CIA to head off Allende if it could by whipping up sentiment in friendly journals for an anti-communist coalition, but the bugle sounded too late," unquote.
In testimony to the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Intelligence, as reported by Seymour Hersh in the New York Times, William Colby, the director of the CIA, said that $350,000 had been authorized by the 40 Committee to try and bribe members of the Chilean Congress as part of a complicated scheme to overturn the results of the election. This overall plan was initially approved by the 40 Committee, but later called unworkable. With the election confirmed by the Congress in October, the CIA embarked on its destabilization program. In January of 1975, Richard Helms, ex-CIA director, told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that there was no doubt in 1970 that the Nixon administration wanted to have Allende overthrown. He said that this became a thing that they were interested in having done. The New York Times reported that on September 15th, 11 days after the election of Allende, President Nixon called a secret meeting at the White House, attended by Henry Kissinger, Richard Helms, and John Mitchell, then Attorney General. The meeting was considered unusual because it was out of the normal channels of transmitting instructions to the CIA.
One of the U.S. multinational corporations most threatened by the possible election of Salvador Allende in 1970 was International Telephone and Telegraph, or ITT. According to Counterspy, the magazine published by the Fifth Estate in Washington, Richard Helms, the then acting director of the CIA, met with none other than John McCone, ex-director of that agency, sometime before the election of Allende to analyze the possibility of an Allende victory at the polls. This meeting cannot just be construed as a couple of good old boys from the CIA getting together to chat, however, since McCone, who was by that time a member of the board of directors of ITT, had the interests of his stockholders to protect. And according to Counterspy, after the election of Allende on September 4th, 1970, Harold Janine, the president of ITT, sent a set of proposals to U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Those proposals dealt with a possible U.S. intervention in Chile, and in those proposals, Janine reportedly said that he was, quote, prepared to help economically with sums up to 7 figures for operations that will preserve the interests of ITT in Chile, unquote.
Allende did not receive a majority of the votes cast in the 1970 presidential election, so according to Chilean law, his election had to be confirmed by the Congress. It was during this period of time that the U.S., through its covert agencies, launched a series of actions designed to keep Salvador Allende from taking office. Richard Helms, then director of the Central Intelligence Agency, was a very busy man, it seems. From the reports that have come to light in the past 2 years, it is clear that the CIA was checking out every possibility that might keep Allende from power. And, according to testimony given during the hearings on multinational corporations by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in March of 1973, Helms and others in the CIA helped to prepare a plan that would bring economic chaos to Chile, in collaboration with ITT Vice President Edward Garrity. Garrity met with William Broey of the CIA's Western Hemisphere Clandestine Services Division to discuss, quote, possible actions to apply economic pressure that would keep Allende from being confirmed by the Chilean Congress. This meeting took place in late September of 1970, almost a month before the confirmation vote was scheduled to take place. In a memorandum published by columnist Jack Anderson 2 years later, an ITT official stated, quote, Broey advises to keep on the pressure, this because Allende should not take office with complete support, and also for the weakening we might want to accomplish after he takes office. Also, there is always a chance that something might happen later, end quote.
In his secret meeting on September 15, 1973, Nixon gave a blanket authorization for the CIA to make a last-ditch all-out effort to get Allende out. Journalist Nicholas Horak cited one source as saying that Nixon felt money was no object and that he authorized an initial expenditure of $10 million to unseat Allende. As a result of this meeting, the CIA became involved in 2 coup plots being developed by right-wing elements in Chile. According to the New York Times, both plots involved the kidnapping of General René Schneider, the chief of staff of the Chilean army. One of the plots was headed up by the commander of the military garrison in Santiago, Camilo Valenzuela. Authoritative government sources were reported to have said that Richard Helms, while CIA director, prepared a memo in the fall of 1970 saying that the CIA supplied machine guns and tear gas grenades to those involved in the plot. Later, they said that the guns and grenades came back to the CIA unused. Kissinger denied having any knowledge of this plot. Kissinger did, however, admit to having knowledge of a second kidnapping plan, which was formulated by retired military officers led by General Roberto Villó.
After the election of Allende in September 1970, sectors within the CIA, in coordination with ITT, felt that Allende's assumption of the presidency could still be prevented. William Merriman wrote John McCone, ITT executive and former head of the CIA, in October 1970 and referred to his last meeting with people from the agency. Quote, approaches continue to be made to select members of the armed forces, he wrote, in an attempt to have them lead some sort of uprising. No success to date, unquote. One of the obstacles to this success was Army Commander-in-Chief General René Schneider. While he was not pro-Marxist, Schneider refused to permit any military intervention in the democratic process in order to prevent Allende's confirmation as president. At about the same time that Merriman was writing to McCone, the main office of ITT received a communication from one of its PR men in Chile. It said that the military would only intervene if the country's stability were sufficiently threatened, and that the threat must be provided one way or another through provocation. ITT's PR man was in reality a CIA agent, Robert Berreyes. Berreyes had worked for many years as an Associated Press reporter. He spent a good part of the years between 1959 and 61 in Havana, Cuba. Following the Bay of Pigs invasion, Berreyes was expelled from the island and soon left his job at AP to join ITT's public relations department. With this new cover, he arrived in Santiago in 1970, along with Hal Hendricks, also of ITT, to report on the situation for the company. Berreyes must have seen in General Schneider what seemed to be the perfect opportunity for a provocation.
It is the morning of October 22, 1970. General Schneider's car is on its usual route to his office. Suddenly, he is surrounded by 4 other cars and within moments shot and fatally wounded. As the ambulance rushes him to the military hospital, the men involved in his assassination begin to scatter. Juan Luis Bulnes, later proved to be among those responsible for Schneider's death, headed immediately for the airport. There he picked up his ticket for Buenos Aires, which earlier had been reserved for him in the name of Robert Berreyes. Berreyes himself would soon fly on to Buenos Aires before Bulnes departed for his final destination, the United States. As Schneider still lay in the hospital in a coma, Robert Viau, a retired right-wing army general who was later proven to be the ringleader of the assassination plot, rushed to his house to burn any incriminating documents. Viau had been in steady contact over a period of time with the United States, and in particular, Berreyes and Hendricks. In fact, when Viau met with the two, he was given verbal assurance that he would receive material help and support from the United States. But despite the precautions which he took, Viau was later arrested for his participation in the crime. Operation Alpha, as the plan to kidnap Schneider was called, was a plot by the right to create a situation of terror in Chile and then blame it on the left. The reactionaries had hoped that this might prove to be the provocation necessary to encourage the military to step in and prevent the confirmation of Allende as president by the Congress. Instead, the plan was uncovered and quickly revealed by the left. Allende demanded a change in the head of investigations, the police department, Luis Gaspar de Fonseca, who is believed to have ties with the CIA. Shortly thereafter, arrest warrants were issued for Viau, Bulnes, and others involved in the plot, including the 2 sons of Guillermo Carey, a vice president of Anaconda Copper Company.
As the right was quickly to learn, mass support for the UP government was too strong to allow it to be overthrown by an individual terrorist action. Paramilitary actions would have to be increasingly well planned and executed, and they would have to be coordinated with the opposition's mass agitations. With the failure of the Schneider assassination, Patria y Libertad was formed in early 1971 to carry out this plan. The assassination of Schneider backfired in the coup plan. Members of Chile's Christian Democratic Party were left shocked and outraged by the event. Shortly afterwards, the Christian Democrats and the Popular Unity settled on a series of agreements which resulted in full support being given to Allende by the Christian Democrats in his congressional confirmation. Allende then assumed the presidency in November of 1970.
After the congressional confirmation of Salvador Allende in October 1970, the efforts to remove him from office began. ITT was very much involved in these efforts, since the company's future profits in Chile were very much endangered by the rise to power of the Unidad Popular. Shortly after Allende took office, William Broey of the CIA and John McCone, now of ITT, met to discuss the possibility of making contact with members of the Chilean armed forces who, quote, would be able to lead some kind of uprising, end quote. In January of 1971, ITT organized, according to Fortune magazine, a committee of corporate interest to pressure the U.S. government to take action against the government of Chile, and to also influence international credit agencies to turn down Chilean loan applications. In October of that year, U.S. Secretary of State William Rogers told a gathering of business leaders that, quote, "This is a business administration, and its business is to protect American business." ITT, Anaconda Copper, Ford Motor Company, Ralston Purina, and the First National City Bank, another institution with friendly ties to the CIA, all had representatives at that meeting, and one of the main topics of discussion was a proposed embargo of equipment and parts needed by Chilean businesses.
Apparently, this was one of several meetings held by members of the Nixon administration with U.S. business leaders to plan actions that would throw the Allende government into economic crisis. It is ironic that while executives of ITT were busily working to undermine the Allende government by any means necessary, the Allende government was negotiating with the company about compensation for the nationalization of the Chilean telephone company Chiltelco. But on March 21, 1972, Jack Anderson published reports on the efforts of the company to subvert the Chilean economy and the contacts between ITT and the Central Intelligence Agency. On the day Anderson published the ITT papers, the negotiations between ITT and the Allende government ended. But the efforts by U.S. multinational corporations to bring economic crisis to Chile continued. Ford Motor Company closed its plants in Chile, with General Motors doing the same, and Ralston Purina refused to pay its customs taxes. The U.S.-owned copper companies were also busy, and the people at Anaconda and Kennecott managed to obtain an embargo against Chilean products in the U.S. Kennecott also brought a lawsuit against the government of France to block the payments from that country for copper from Chile. Private banks in the U.S. cut Chile's access to loans from $200 million to $35 million. All of this had the intended effect in Chile. With a shortage of parts, public transportation vehicles that had broken down could not be repaired, causing a transportation crisis in Chile's urban areas. The loss of financial credits brought chaos to many Chilean businesses, and on October 11th, the first owner strike by middle-class Chileans began. An 18-point program for economic crisis in Chile, as described in an October 1971 ITT memo to the Nixon White House, stated in part that, quote, everything should be done quietly but effectively to see that Allende does not get through the next 6 months, unquote. The plan was working well, although Allende was to continue as president of Chile for another 23 months. And in the United States, the newspapers were full of gleeful reports of the destruction of the Chilean economy under the rule of Marxist Salvador Allende.
Nathaniel Davis became the U.S. ambassador to Chile, replacing Edward Corey in October 1971. As head of the U.S. diplomatic mission in Chile, Davis was the immediate supervisor of all those Americans working in the U.S. Embassy. His subordinates included
Dean Hinton. Hinton became the director of the Agency for International Development in Chile in 1969 and remained in that position until 1971, when he was asked to go to Washington and serve as the deputy director of the Council on International Economic Policy, a subcommittee of the National Security Council. In 1956, Hinton joined the CIA as a State Department research specialist. He was promoted within a month to acting chief, and 1 month after that became chief of the Office of Research and Analysis for Western Europe. From 1961 to 1962, Hinton attended the National War College. Hinton also served as director for AID in Guatemala. He arrived when Guatemalan guerrillas were at their strongest. Acting in conjunction with the local military and U.S. Green Berets, AID CIA forces began their pacification program modeled after Vietnam. His next job sent him to Chile.
Daniel Arzak. Arzak joined the U.S. Embassy in Santiago 1 year after the election of Allende as a political officer. Arzak studied in the San Francisco Bay Area before joining the State Department and the CIA in July of 1953. He served as an intelligence research analyst in Cambodia and then in Uruguay at the same time that E. Howard Hunt was CIA station chief for Montevideo. Before going to Chile, Arzak also served in Paraguay and Colombia.
John B. Tipton. Tipton joined the CIA and the State Department in 1958 as an intelligence research specialist. He served as a labor officer in Mexico City from May of 1960 to September of 1962. He spent some time in Bolivia and after being trained in labor relations was sent to Guatemala. He arrived in Santiago in January of 1972 to serve as a political officer.
Raymond A. Warren. Warren joined the CIA in 1954 and was sent to Guatemala, where he participated in the overthrow of the Arbenz government. He served as an economic advisor in Venezuela and Chile before going to Colombia as a political officer. After a short stay in the United States, Warren was sent to Chile. He arrived to serve as a political officer in October of 1970, the month that Allende was being confirmed as president.
Arnold Isaacs, Frederick Latrache, Joseph McManus, Keith Wheelock, and Donald Winters also served as political officers in Chile. Isaacs joined the CIA in 1959, Latrache was in Guatemala for the coup in 1954, Wheelock worked for the CIA from 1960 to 1962.
On numerous occasions during the last 20 years, the U.S. government has used coup teams as a major weapon to combat anti-imperialist governments. Such teams are composed of CIA operatives with special skills in overthrowing governments. The biographies reveal that the U.S. Embassy in Chile, and more specifically its political section, served as the cover for the CIA operatives. Nathaniel Davis is now the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. Hinton is ambassador to Zaire, and Schlotterman is now the ambassador to Venezuela.
Nathaniel Davis was an obvious choice as ambassador to Chile during the destabilization period. He began his career as an officer of the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which was the forerunner of the CIA. A career Foreign Service officer, Davis served in Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, and Bulgaria during the Cold War years, and got his initial experience in Chile as head of the Peace Corps in 1963. Prior to assuming the post of U.S. Ambassador to Chile, he served as ambassador to Guatemala, a Latin American country that had had more than a little CIA intervention in its internal affairs. It appears that, in addition to his wealth of experience in carrying out orders well, Davis was selected for the Chile assignment for his skill in appearing removed from the cloak and dagger activities that have surrounded him in every diplomatic assignment he has ever taken. His predecessor, Edward Corey, had managed to infuriate the Chilean government with his blatant anti-Allende attitude, and it was clear that someone with a much lower profile was needed at the U.S. Embassy in Santiago.
Ambassador Davis had the practice of inviting visiting U.S. personalities, including senators, to the embassy, and also inviting high officials of the Chilean government to have deep and sincere discussions about how to improve U.S.-Chilean relations. And I find it rather curious that at the very time that Ambassador Davis must have known about the covert activities and, of course, was helping to instrument them from Santiago, he was carrying on this elaborate pretense of that the United States was earnestly trying to solve its differences with Chile. Also, there's one other important point. An ambassador is supposed to carry out lawful orders. The whole point is that under the Bogota Charter of the OAS, 1948, it specifically bans all signatory nations from intervening in the national affairs of another country. Now, these were illegal orders that the ambassador was carrying out, and if he had been an honorable man, he would have resigned, and thus he must be held accountable in the same way that the Nuremberg trials preached a whole thesis of accountability, and the Watergate and the trial of Lieutenant Calley. That is, this was an excess of the lawful mandate that an ambassador had.
That important point on accountability was made by Lawrence Burns of the New School for Social Research. Davis left Chile after the 1973 military coup that took Allende from power. And, despite all the revelations over the past 2 years about U.S. involvement in the internal political affairs of Chile, Nathaniel Davis has skillfully managed to escape any hard questioning about his role there. In February of this year, during the confirmation hearings on Davis's fitness to serve as Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Representative Michael Harrington of Massachusetts put forth the following.
Mr. Colby's testimony to the House Armed Services Subcommittee provides one stark example of the clandestine role played by American officials in Chile. In the summer of 1973, a representative of the Chilean truckers sought secret financial assistance from the United States for a planned national strike. According to Mr. Colby, the American Embassy and the CIA staff in Santiago, headed by Mr. Davis, recommended a CIA expenditure of $50,000 for this purpose, to senior intelligence officials in Washington. The 40 Committee turned down this request for reasons that appear unrelated to the propriety of such funding in light of their subsequent decision the next month authorizing $1 million into stabilization funds. I offer this example based on my recollection of Mr. Colby's testimony merely to highlight the dearth of information that has become known about the participation in this government with the knowledge and assistance of Mr. Davis in a systematic attempt to help anti-Allende forces in Chile. It is clear from the Colby testimony that American embassy officials were fully informed of CIA operations in that country and participated in the decision-making process. This is consistent with State Department policy first established by President Kennedy, that the U.S. ambassador is responsible for all United States government activities, including those of the CIA, within the country in which he serves.
Nathaniel Davis, according to a report filed by New York Times correspondent Seymour Hersh in September of last year, was more than just aware of the CIA activities in Chile. According to a well-informed source quoted by Hersh in the Times, the ambassador is in charge of these operations. And if there are those who have any doubt that the U.S. Embassy in Santiago, under the guidance of Ambassador Davis, was involved in the destabilization efforts, there's the cable sent by Davis to the U.S. State Department in 1972 and published by columnist Jack Anderson, which suggested that in preparation for a military coup in Chile, it was first necessary to create, quote, a discontent so profound that a military intervention would be warmly received.
According to NACLA's Latin America and Empire report, although the embassy structure is effective and played an important role in Chile, it is in many ways a lightning rod for the more covert CIA structure which exists. While there have been several cases of CIA agents whose covers have been blown while working for the State Department, Joseph Vasile, Raymond Warren, Daniel Arzak to name a few, there are fewer CIA agents who functioned within the resident structure who have been positively identified. Running parallel to the embassy structure, but unknown even to the CIA station chief and the U.S. ambassador, the resident structure operates under deep cover. It is headed by the resident, whose cover is generally that of an executive with a multinational company, a natural and universally usable cover for U.S. intelligence agents, given the nature of imperialism. Beneath the resident is a team of case officers who are also U.S. citizens and full-time employees of the agency. In Chile, the resident receives orders directly from the chief of the Latin America Area Division of the Director of Operations in Washington. Each operation or type of operation which is ordered by the CIA is designated a project and then assigned to one of the case officers. The job of the resident and the case officers consists of building up in-country networks over the years so that when they are needed they can be activated simply and quickly. Recruits are gathered from a variety of places. Many are spotted in exchange programs conducted by the State Department, AID, USIA, AIFLD, private organizations, universities, foundations, or CIA-sponsored training courses for foreign officers at the International Police Academy. CIA recruiters pay particular attention to military personnel and students, both of whom are extremely upwardly mobile in Latin American society and could provide a high-level government contact in the future. The foreign nationals recruited by the CIA form the base of the residence structure and the key to successful intelligence operations in the country. From 1960 to 1973, tens of thousands of Chileans participated in these exchange programs.
Defiendo mi tierra de noche y de día, de noche y de día. Yo defiendo mi tierra porque es mía, la defiendo de noche, la defiendo
de día me ayuda el viento,
de noche las Tres Marías.
Ay, 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 ay. Vi cruzar por la pampa llorando, llorando,
la mujer del minero, sus pies sangrando. ¿Por qué llorará este pueblo? Voy preguntando. Ay, 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 ay.
October of 1971, the Nixon administration decided to take the offensive against the Allende government in Chile in a much more active way. According to a person described as a first-hand source by the New York Times, there was not one particular reason for this change. Quote, "It was a lot of little things, signs that the leftists in the Allende government were in the ascendancy." The first step in the process seems to be the appointment of Nathaniel Davis as ambassador to Chile. One Nixon administration source, quoted by Seymour Hersh in the Times, said that the instructions given to Davis were that, "From now on, you may aid the opposition by any means possible." In addition to the support provided to right-wing political parties in Chile by the United States via the CIA, a very large amount of money, over half the $8 million spent by the CIA in Chile during the Allende years, went to support strikes that would have a paralyzing effect on the Chilean economy. Among those heavily subsidized were the truck owners who organized a 26-day strike in October 1972. Direct CIA subsidies were also granted, according to sources quoted in the New York Times, to striking middle-class shop owners and the organizers of a taxi strike.
I can say this much, that I, as an American, or as somebody who was in Chile, I mean, I must have heard 27 times that, that the truckers were being paid by the Central Intelligence Agency. I'm not one to doubt it.
The CIA also financed a massive series of strikes that took place in the summer of 1973, including a second trucker strike, which eventually included 250,000 truck owners, shopkeepers, and professionals. It appears that some of the CIA money destined for the strikers was funneled through companies based in Mexico, Venezuela, and Peru. One Chilean businessman who received strike benefits told Jonathan Kandel of the New York Times that he had no way of knowing if the money he received came from the CIA, but added that no questions were ever asked. But another Chilean trucker, when asked about such things by a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, replied with a broad smile, "CIA gracias." The money given as strike benefits by the CIA in Chile was always changed into Chilean escudos on the black market, thus increasing the value by about 800%. Therefore, the money was worth more than $40 million. During the October 1972 trucker strike, the price of the dollar on the black market dropped for the first time in months, indicating an influx of dollars into the country. Time magazine correspondent Rudolf Rauch also reported having visited a group of strikers near Santiago who were, quote, enjoying a lavish communal meal of steak, vegetables, wine, and empanadas. He asked them where the money for this meal came from. From the CIA, the truckers answered. The rationale for this kind of support, as one CIA official explained it to Seymour Hersh, was that, quote, the agency tries to support the people who believe in its aim. The official also explained that financial assistance for radio stations and newspapers in Chile was essential since, quote, it wouldn't have been too good to have strikes if nobody knows about it. The CIA official also told the New York Times that, quote, as long as you don't make it sound like we were trying to start a coup, it'll be all right.
Run, run, se fue pa'l norte, no sé cuándo vendrá. Vendrá para el cumpleaños de nuestra soledad.
The American Institute for Free Labor Development's backdoor support of the right-wing opposition against Allende is in fact part of its labor policy in Latin America. According to AIFLD President Corporate Executive J. Peter Grace, the AIFLD's objectives are to, quote, promote democratic free trade unions, to prevent communist infiltration, and where it already exists, to get rid of it, unquote. Grace cites the AIFLD record to prove its effectiveness. Quote, AIFLD trains Latin Americans in techniques of combating communist infiltration. This training has paid off handsomely in many situations. For instance, AIFLD trainees have driven communists from port unions which were harassing shipping in Latin America. After several years of effort, AIFLD men were able to take over control of the port union in Uruguay, which had long been dominated by communists. AIFLD men also helped drive communists from control of British Guiana. They prevented the communists from taking over powerful unions in Honduras and helped to drive the communists from the strong jugular unions in Brazil, unquote. Despite the union label and labor participation of George Meany, the AIFLD's main task is protecting U.S. business interests. J. Peter Grace says, quote, the AIFLD urges cooperation between labor and management and an end to class struggle. It teaches workers to help increase their company's business, unquote. Sponsorship of AIFLD is tripartite: labor, business, and government. Among corporate supporters are ITT, Kennecott Copper Company, Chase Manhattan Bank, United Fruit Company, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Pan American World Airways, First National City Bank, and W.R. Grayson Company. The AIFLD offers training programs at its own institute in Port Royal, Virginia, as well as local seminars. The 1962 to 1972 Special Anniversary Report of the AIFLD estimated that 79 Chileans had studied at Port Royal, 8,837 in seminars conducted in Chile, and 6 graduates returned for the special advanced course in labor economics held at George Washington University. In a list of graduates from AIFLD collected by the Institute itself in a special memorandum dated February 28, 1973, there are 108 Chileans representing about 100 professional and trade unions, concentrated in transportation and communications, sectors which led the October 1972 strike and the subsequent July-August 1973 strike, opening the way for the coup. According to these figures, from 1972 to 1973, the increase in average yearly enrollment of Chileans at the Institute was 360%. In Chile, AIFLD actions were designed to undo the direction of the government, and they never found it possible to approach the CUT, the nation's large labor federation, for affiliation. The CUT, Central Única de Trabajadores, has always rejected any ties with AIFLD as penetration. They wanted nothing to do with the programs and personnel funded through the U.S. State Department. The one Chilean union that AIFLD has been able to relate to for 15 years is COMACH, a small maritime confederation. In recent years, AIFLD has been able to extend its relations among unions in Chile through the use of its union-to-union program. This was fully described in a classified document from the U.S. Comptroller General's office in August of 1970. By subsidizing U.S. unions to obtain the services of the international trade secretariats they are affiliated with, AIFLD has developed indirect ways to open doors that were previously locked. The leader of Chile's CUT, Luis Figueroa, after his escape from the military junta, accused AIFLD of, quote, 13 years of massive social espionage. In Stockholm on September 11, 1974, he said, quote, the North American AFL-CIO, led by George Meany, is proven to be an instrument of imperialism. It is precisely with money from the AFL-CIO that the military junta now seeks to create new Chilean unions that are docile in the face of dictatorship, unquote. At a time when the U.S. State Department had cut most credits and economic aid to Chile, $1 million a year was set aside for special technical assistance programs. Part of these funds were earmarked for AIFLD training programs.
On September 11th, the belabored coup plans, in part developed by the CIA, finally came to fruition in the most bloody and terrifying event in recent Latin American history. As the report of the death of Salvador Allende reached the international press, so did the countless reports of arrests of Allende supporters. Soon the reports became merged with accounts of torture and assassination, the militarization of schools, factories, and universities, and in general of the entire Chilean society. All of the gains and goals of the Popular Unity government were brutally overturned as the campaign to eliminate the cancer of Marxism came to life in the burning of books, the silencing of the press, the closing of Congress, and the destruction of the Central Federation of Chilean Workers. As thousands of Chileans began to be victims of the repression aimed at finishing the junta's bloody task, fascism in Chile was met with international outrage, which still expresses itself in the countless campaigns to aid Chilean refugees, defend political prisoners in Chile, denounce torture, and expose the economic disaster perpetrated by the junta in Chile. This effort has been and continues to be a worldwide answer to the call for solidarity with the Chilean people by their heroic resistance movement, a movement which no longer fits into the boundaries of any country and which grows day by day.
Those of the middle classes who supported the coup are, ironically, among those hardest hit by the disastrous economic situation in Chile today. One wonders, who has benefited from the coup in Chile? There are no apparent ways in which the majority of the people of Chile have benefited. The people of the United States, who paid for many of the actions that helped bring the coup about, have not seemingly reaped any rewards from the rise of fascism in Chile. But there are a few people who have benefited from the destruction of democracy in Chile. A few of the benefactors are Chileans. The wealthiest classes in business and finance and agriculture, and those in the upper stratas of the military, have profited from the coup. But perhaps the ones who have reaped the greatest rewards since September 11, 1973's coup in Chile are the foreign investors, many of whom are from the United States. IT&T is back in Chile, as is General Motors and General Tire and Rubber. It's estimated that there may be as many as 30 multinational corporations that have returned to Chile since the coup. There is also a list of new investors in Chile, among them Cypress Mines Corporation, a copper mining concern, Diamond M Drilling Company, which plans oil explorations, and First National City Bank, which has issued $11.2 million worth of bonds for the junta. And unlike the Allende years, there are many U.S. banks now willing to extend credit to the new government in Chile, including the Chase Manhattan Bank, Bank of America, and Manufacturers Hanover Trust. And there are reasons to believe that despite the cutoff of military aid to the junta by the U.S. Congress, as passed in Senator Edward Kennedy's amendment to the U.S. Foreign Aid Bill, those in power in Washington find the junta much more appealing than the Allende government. Grants and aid from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agency for International Development, and the Food for Peace program have skyrocketed since September 1973. So, for some, the rise to power of the military junta has been profitable.
In the months to come, we can expect to learn even more about the specific role of the United States government in the overthrow of President Salvador Allende. Many of the same congressmen who closed their eyes to CIA involvement in Chile in the past 2 decades now sit on committees investigating the CIA's covert operations, listening to tales of CIA subversion in Chile that will make good leaks to the press. The reporters who, a few years ago, rushed to report each strike and right-wing protest in Chile now write long articles about the unfortunate U.S. involvement in the affairs of that country. But even after all the facts are in, there will still remain 2 unanswered questions. The first question is one of timing. When will the people who control the flow of information about the activities of the U.S. government abroad deem it appropriate to let the people of this country know about the improper activities while they happen? It is acceptable in 1975 for a national news magazine to report with distaste the statement made by President Ford that U.S. intervention in Chile was in the best interests of the Chilean people. There is no distaste expressed, however, when several months later the President bemoans the fact that the current investigations of the CIA are interfering with that agency's ability to operate successfully in Portugal. Stories of CIA intervention in Chile are on the front page of the New York Times, but the list of CIA operatives active in destabilizing the socialist government in Portugal, compiled by Philip Agee in August of 1975, has yet to see print in any major U.S. newspaper. There is a second question. How much longer will the people of the United States, whose tax dollars finance the CIA and other covert arms of the U.S. government, allow bribery, torture, and murder to continue in their name? For the people of Chile, our resounding no to CIA intervention in their country might have meant a different history for them. For millions of other people around the world, there is still time if we, the people of the United States, do not wait too long.
Sabiendo ustedes, compañeros, que se abrirán las grandes alamedas por donde pase el hombre construyendo para siempre su libertad. Y se abrirán las grandes alamedas por donde pase el hombre construyendo para siempre su libertad. Y se abrirán las grandes alamedas por donde pase el hombre construyendo para siempre su libertad. Estas son mis últimas palabras, con la certeza que mi sacrificio y el de ustedes en vano no será. Sigan sabiendo, queridos compañeros, que una sanción moral castigará esta traición, cobarde felonía y este momento amargo y gris. Y se abrirán las grandes alamedas por donde pase el hombre construyendo para siempre su libertad. Y se abrirán, y se abrirán, y se abrirán por donde pase el hombre construyendo para siempre su libertad. Y se abrirán, y se abrirán, y se abrirán por donde pase el hombre construyendo para siempre su libertad.
This program was written and produced by the Public Affairs and Third World Departments of KPFA. Additional tape materials were gathered by Paz Cohen in Washington. Technical production was by Eric Shilling. Sources used in the research for this program include the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, the Washington Star, the Wall Street Journal, Fortune Magazine, Counterspy, the publications of the North American Congress on Latin America, Non-Intervention in Chile, and the Emergency Committee to Defend Democracy in Chile. Special thanks to Lincoln Bergman and others who made this program possible. So Much Blood and Fire, Saving Chile from Democracy was produced at KPFK for Pacifica Radio.